Okay. Can everybody hear me? We're good? All right. Um, so, um, so we gave back the midterm. People did pretty well, actually. I think the average was like 119 out of 140, so that's pretty good. If you have any grading questions, please talk to the TAs and try to resolve it. And if you can't resolve it with the TAs, come to me and we'll figure it out. Last time we talked about the Turing test, whether machines can think, the foundations of AI. Um, what is intelligence? It's still hard to say. We know it when we see it, but it's very hard to define. So the Turing test defines intelligence as whether something or some entity can pass a Turing test. A bunch of Q&A after a short period of time, say half an hour or an hour, you determine whether there's something intelligent behind the curtain. And you can't look, you can just interact like texts. And with this famous paper, Turing founded the entire field of AI. And it's still going strong today. Today, machine learning is at the forefront of most highly capable systems, including self-driving cars and recommendation systems, and almost everything now involves AI of one kind or another. And machine learning is a sub-area of artificial intelligence. So this famous Turing test decoupled the notion of intelligence from being human, two separate things. We talked about bots, like chatterbots, that can fool most people most of the time these days. They're so sophisticated into thinking they're intelligent or even human. On the other side, there's international competitions for the AI kind of Turing test capable systems, and they're getting more and more sophisticated by the day, actually. Many of them are self-learning. And so the question then boils down, given the Turing test, which entities can pass the Turing test, rather which entities are actually intelligent. And so it becomes relative to us humans. And certain things can pass the Turing tests very clearly, and some can't. Inanimate objects obviously can't, or lower life forms like insects will have lots of trouble with the Turing test. But other entities, and I use examples from science fiction because we don't have fully intelligent entities yet that we created that can pass the Turing test. Other entities can clearly pass it, and thereby we concede that they're intelligent based on their behaviors and input-output kind of capabilities when we interact with them in a Turing test-like scenario. So we went through some criticisms of the Turing test. It's not all fun and games. There's some issues. There's something called the Chinese room analogy or scenario, where you can have an entity inside a box that communicates intelligently with the outside world, yet obviously doesn't understand what's going on, like this guy that speaks in Chinese and passes the Turing test in Chinese, yet doesn't even understand Chinese, much less what was discussed between him and the outside world. He just follows mechanical instructions like code. And these kind of arguments and contemplations about intelligence and the Turing test and sentience and consciousness cross many disciplinary boundaries, including philosophy and psychology, and even biology. So there's lots and lots of debate to this day as to what is really going on. Reverse Turing tests, you can have things like CAPTCHAs that are very practical. So every day you take reverse Turing tests when you try to go into certain websites. Very practical applications of Turing tests. And then we went to some science fiction movie scenarios to kind of illustrate entities that were not just highly intelligent, but perhaps even more intelligent than humans, according to these movie scenarios. And for the movie buffs in the audience, if we left out any kind of movie names or descriptions, maybe for extra credit, try to nail down the rest of the ones that we did explicitly mention. Plus, there's lots of good movies here that you can dig into if you enjoy this kind of motif about AIs, bots, intelligences, modern-day Frankenstein stories. For example, Westworld is an amazing TV show. I highly recommend that. The whole show basically revolves around the Turing test and its consequences, sentience and artificial intelligence. So we said that reality is quickly catching up with science fiction. So movies aside, you know, Isaac Asimov invented the word robotics, the field of robotics back in the 40s, had great science fiction stories based on laws of robotics. So it was almost like codified programming made into story plots, into novels, and just fascinating consequences of all that. How many have read Isaac Asimov robot stories over time or seen them? The movie I, Robot with Will Smith actually, you know, is actually a pale shadow of Asimov's actual stories, because you know it's only had 2 hours for the movie and to describe what's going on, and it can't be too deep or sophisticated. But you know, if you like the movie I, Robot, you should really dig into Asimov's robot stories, which he wrote before computer science was invented, really, beginning in the 1940s, which is actually in itself amazing. So we described various real-life bots. So these are now not science fiction. These are fact. These are technologies, products even, that you can buy. Robots that can roam around and do things and do it very autonomously. Often they can do it by themselves, whatever the mission is. Go somewhere and find something or some target or even some humans, and you know, do something dramatic, you know, like destroy them. So literally killer apps, and we have them now. In practice, you still want a human in the loop, not so much for technical reasons, but for legal and ethical reasons and reasons of international law. You often want to keep a human in the loop to do the final decision of go, no go, you know, to pull a trigger or not. But it's becoming less and less necessary. You know, these bots, these drones, can do most of it and sometimes all the entire mission by themselves, which is, you know, both very impressive and also very worrisome, because it raises Terminator kind of scenarios very quickly. You know, we got aerial bots, Reapers, that can bomb things. You got dirigibles, you got helicopters, you even got ones that are really tiny. You can release insect-like bots and that will fly around and track things and do surveillance. And if some of them are squashed or destroyed or stepped on, no big deal, because it's you have a whole cloud, an army of these little tiny insectoid kind of bots. You can have them underwater, and you can have them as self-driving cars like the ARPA Urban Challenge a few years back, from which modern cars like the Tesla Model S has arisen in just a few years. And these cars can drive themselves, you know, and how do I know? Because I got one. And so we mentioned that we'll give demos soon enough, maybe in a week or two. We'll arrange a weekend where I bring that in and take some joyride, so you can see what an AI, you know, bot car can do. It's actually 3 times as safe as a human right now in terms of accidents per passenger mile. Really amazing. Insurance companies are adjusting to this, and soon you'll have cheaper premiums if your car can do self-driving, as it should. You should only pay less if it's less risky. This car will avoid accidents actively, actually. If it sees something crosses your path like a deer or another car or somebody, it would get out of the way or stop, you know, within the bounds of the laws of physics. It would try really hard to prevent an accident. If you fall asleep on the wheel or are drunk or can't control your car, the car will take over, pull over to the side, come to a safe stop on the side of the freeway, and call 911, give them your GPS coordinates, and you should be okay. You know, nobody should get hurt, not yourself and not other cars or other passengers in other vehicles or pedestrians. So this is not science fiction. This is right now. This is a product. You can buy one today. And self-aware bots in space, they have a long history, because that's what you'd expect. Space exploration, very harsh environment, very far away places. Mars is half a light hour away from us. Pluto is about 1 light day away from us, just outside the outer borders of the solar system, just inside, I guess, the outer borders of the solar system. And even on the moon, you want bots. It's very hard to put humans in those kind of environments. It takes a huge amount of effort and risk and expense, for that matter, to get people out there. So we've had bots in space for a long, long time. This is Carl Sagan showing the Mariner spacecraft that landed on Mars. How many know who Carl Sagan is? Okay, good. He's sort of the intellectual daddy of Neil deGrasse Tyson, that is now kind of the modern Carl Sagan, doing popularization of space exploration and science. But Carl Sagan did it in the 1970s with a great TV show called Cosmos, 10-part TV series that talked about all aspects of science and technology. An amazing show in itself, and I highly recommend that you watch it if you get a chance. There's a new version of Cosmos with Neil deGrasse Tyson. I think the old one is much more impressive, given that it was made in the 1970s before CGI was invented, computer-generated graphics were even invented. So now you expect more out of shows and movies. So we have bots that do AI on Mars and throughout the solar system, and we're putting more and more into space. It's been going on for a long time. Car factories, and not just car factories, but factories in general now use bots, use AI and robotics to build things. So factories now are mostly automated. There are factories that are 98% automated, just few people on the floor just to make sure the robots are not revolting or something and doing their job. But so now you have machines building other machines, not just other more mundane products like shirts and shoes. So a lot of these bots that you see here are not even brand new. These have been around for 5 or 10, in some cases 15 years, and they're getting more and more sophisticated. They can do welding and assembling and lots of cool things. You can have bots now inside your house. The Roomba has been around for almost 20 years now, or a robotic vacuum. How many have a Roomba, or a Roomba-like equivalent robotic vacuum? Yeah, I have a couple of those. It's really, really cool. It can plug itself in when it runs out of battery, and then recharge itself, and then keep on going and keep cleaning your house. And you can put on a schedule, and your house just remains vacuumed nicely. And there's industrial versions of this, really big ones for hotels and conference centers where a little one wouldn't cut it, but a big one will do a much more thorough job, and it's industrial strength. And then you have bots that mimic animals and humans. There's actually products. You could buy a little robotic dog that will do very clever things. It'll be a lot smarter than a regular dog, actually. And dogs are pretty clever. It'll go and fetch stuff and do tricks, and pretty cool. The price is dropping on some of these products very, very rapidly. Originally, the Sony Aibo dog bot was like $20,000, very sophisticated. Nowadays, you could probably get bots at Toys R Us for a few $100s that'll sort of do the equivalent of what that did some years ago. And they're getting more and more sophisticated. So again, this is not science fiction. These are products. These are facts. These are actually devices that work, and not just prototypes, but commercial products. The Asimo bot, again, a commercial product by Sony, can do very amazing things. Here we see it conducting an orchestra. Yo-Yo Ma on cello was so impressed, he was trying to shake its hand or even kiss it. I'm not sure which. But conducting an orchestra is actually much harder than it sounds and looks. You have to do a lot of eye-hand coordination and listen to the music and see what the orchestra is doing, and make very fine motor activities and motions and things like that. You can have bots that make you breakfast and then serve it to you. Again, these are products, commercial products. There are bots that you can wear. There's exoskeleton kind of robots where you and the robot become kind of unified, and you wear these robotic exoskeletons, and it'll increase your strength. Could be 3x or 5x. You become. It's like Iron Man. Iron Man is basically an exoskeleton kind of bot that Tony Stark works in his Avenger movies and Iron Man movies. That's becoming a reality too. It's actually, these are products now. Some of them past the prototype stage. It can help you go upstairs if you're having issues with locomotion and mobility. So you can be a paraplegic now and still use a bot that you wear to move around and go upstairs and stand and do everyday normal things, even though you don't have the use of your natural legs, which is amazing. It's an amazing capability, and it enhances your strength. The military obviously is very interested in that. There's militarized exoskeletons that allow you to carry hundreds of pounds of material on your back and still run very fast and go through hundreds of miles of traversal of desert really easily and that kind of thing. So obviously there's military applications to to these kind of robotics capabilities. In fact, there's a military application to everything, and that's driving a lot of advances. And unfortunately, that it takes a war to mobilize people to invent and create, but that's kind of how it goes. So they're getting more and more prolific. There are robots now that can perform surgery on you. This is the Da Vinci robotic surgeon. It does surgery on people with micron level kind of precision, sub-millimeter kind of precision, and do sutures. And you can do it inside your body when the entry channel to the body is just a few millimeters wide. You don't have to open up the chest of a patient anymore, so surgeons with big clunky hands will go in there and do things. The robot can go into a tiny little hole, like laparoscopic surgery, and it's a lot less intrusive, a lot safer, a lot quicker, and you heal faster because you just have a tiny little incision wound. You don't have a big kind of open chest kind of surgery kind of scenario. And these bots are saving lives. They've been doing that for 10 or more years now. This is a product. How many have seen or heard about robotic surgeons? Okay, they can do tiny little sutures inside your body and fix things with robotic precision that no human can possibly match on a very tiny scale, sub-millimeter kind of accuracy, micron type accuracy. And this has been going on for a while now. Of course, you still want some doctors in the room to oversee things and make sure nothing goes terribly awry. That's always a good precaution, but these robots now can do major surgeries mostly on their own, under doctor supervision, just to be on the safe side. So that's pretty amazing, actually. There's some debate or questions whether you trust a robot to do surgery on you, but their track record is so good that at some point you wouldn't trust a human to do it instead of a robot, because the robots have a much higher success rate than humans do when they perform surgery on patients. It's getting to that point, actually, and in some cases exceeds that benchmark, that these robots are better than human surgeons in some cases, in many cases, not necessarily all the time. And that's why you want the humans in the loop. So there are conferences every year and contests about robots, robotics, unmanned systems. It's just one example of them. You see from the date it's been going on for quite a long time, more than a decade, in some cases a decade and a half. And these robots win prizes for doing clever AI-ish kind of things, looking for targets, making real-time navigation decisions, and finding things and retrieving things, and doing surveillance, and making doing some mission that they're being assigned. Now, in some cases, reality, which we just talked about, has far exceeded the science fiction expectations. One of them is the Star Trek communicator. The old Star Trek show, Captain Kirk says, "Beam me up, Scotty," and there's this flip phone kind of communicator that looked like that. Back in the 60s, that was incredibly cool and impressive and almost unbelievable. You could walk around with a phone that's not tethered to anything, and it can call large distances, with perfect clarity. And out of curiosity, how many have seen the old series, not the new series, the old Star Trek vintage? Amazing show, calibrated to the time that it was produced back in 1966, which is a long time ago. So Captain Kirk can do that, and then phones in the real world started imitating not just this capability of untethered long-distance calling, completely mobile, but the form factor of these phones, like the Motorola Razr of 2004, actually looked like a Star Trek communicator. You would flip it open, and just for fun, the apps actually made those kind of beeps that Captain Kirk would sound off when he'd talk to Scotty to beam him up. Well, fast forward another decade or so, and we have the iPhones. This is the iPhone 6. Of course, the iPhone 1 was 2005, I guess, roughly. And just to compare that phone with the old school phones, and even with supercomputers like the Cray 1 of the 1970s, the iPhone can do a couple of gigahertz worth of computation. Now you have even 4 or even 6 cores. Can run for hours or even days on the battery. Costs under a grand. Versus a computer, supercomputer even, like the Cray 1 in 1976. It only ran at 80 megahertz. That was the fastest machine on Earth. And only had 4 megabytes of RAM, not 4 gigabytes, 4 megabytes. And cost over about $10 million. Weighed 5 tons, required 200 kilowatts of energy. So in terms of performance per price kind of ratio, The iPhone is not just better than a supercomputer of the 1970s, but it's actually almost 500,000 times better. And this is just the iPhone 6. The iPhone 10s and 11s are probably 10 or 100 million times faster and more capable than the supercomputers of the 1970s. Of course, now we have much better supercomputers, but essentially we're all walking around with supercomputers in our pockets and purses, which again is unbelievable. You remember Captain Kirk's communicator? All he can do is call Scotty to tell him to beam him up. That's it. You know, he couldn't play chess on it. He couldn't shop on it. He couldn't, do banking on it and do searches on it of, databases and everything we can do on our smartphones. That's way above and beyond what was even, fanciful back in the 60s. This is a good example of reality, not just catching up with science fiction, but far exceeding science fiction, our best expectations. In the 60s, if you said a smartphone can do all these things to somebody in the 60s, they'd think, not only you're crazy, but it's not even worthy of a science fiction story because it's so unbelievable. Science fiction has to be at least somewhat believable to make a good story or a good movie. It can't be completely outrageous, right? But this is completely outrageous. Smartphones, compared to what we thought would be possible or even hoped would be possible. So, reality keeps surpassing science fiction in many scenarios. Another example is chess playing. In the movie 2001: Space Odyssey, there's a sentient kind of evil computer called HAL 9000 that takes over the ship and grapples with the humans and kills some of them even and takes over the mission. One of the things you see is it playing chess with one of the astronauts, and the computer beats him actually. And back in the 60s, that was unbelievable that a computer can beat a really good chess player. I mean, you can beat an amateur, sure, but not a real good player, and certainly not a grandmaster. Well, fast forward about 30 years, and there's reigning chess world champion Garry Kasparov in 1997, looking pretty despondent there because he's losing to a computer for the first time in human history. That world chess champion lost to a bot, and of course, it kept getting even more dramatic. And nowadays, even a team of grandmasters cannot even put a dent in even a small, unsophisticated chess application that can run on your iPhone. So your iPhone can now beat a whole team of world champion grandmaster players working simultaneously. It's quite impressive. Just to put it in perspective, there's an ELO chess rating scale where a chess master is about 2,300 on that scale, based on chess playing skill. And only top 2% of tournament players actually have 2,300 ELO rating or above on the ELO rating scale of chess skill. Grandmaster is 2,500, and only 0.02% of the world competition players are at that level. And a super grandmaster is 2,700. There's only about 30 in the world that can play chess at a grandmaster, super grandmaster level of 2,700 on the ELO scale. There's only 4 that could play at 2,800, and the best players today play at about 2,850. Bobby Fischer, back at his peak in the 1970s, the best player on the planet in the 70s, and some say the best player on the planet ever. 2,895, almost 2,900. Who is today's champion chess player? Yeah, Magnus. And he can play at roughly Bobby Fischer level. Some say a little bit higher, some say a little bit lower, about 2,900 on the ELO scale. The best computers can play at 3,340 or higher. And this was true even 10 years ago. Now they're probably at 3,400 or higher than that. So no human will ever beat a computer again in chess. It's completely hopeless. So again, reality surpassing science fiction by leaps and bounds and orders of magnitude in terms of capability. So now your iPhone can easily, quickly, and efficiently beat the world champion within minutes. It's quite amazing. And again, Kasparov couldn't take it very well, and there was very dramatic kind of soul searching going on in 1997 when computers first beat the world chess champions. People felt a little depressed, despondent about that, but it's pretty straightforward. You can't beat algorithms when they get more and more efficient. Computer algorithms will win every time, for a lot of different things, tasks. There's even a movie came out saying "Game over, Kasparov and the Machine." The Brain's Last Stand, Newsweek, cover story. It's kind of over dramatized for entertainment and dramatic effect in the media, but it's a real trend. People feel threatened by technology. They always have. When steam engines first came out back in the 1800s, people felt threatened that they're losing their jobs, their livelihoods. Steam engines are taking over. They're kind of monstrous and inhuman and soulless, and there was a lot of pushback against steam engines in the 1800s. Some people even destroyed steam engines. Luddites, they would come and sabotage them and destroy them. When cars first came out, people said, 1880s, 1890s, people said, horse and carriage is the way to go. Cars are kind of evil. No, humans were not meant to go that fast. It's unnatural. It's dangerous. They said a horse and buggy, a horse will never jump off a cliff with you on top of the horse because it's trying to preserve its own existence, its own life. It's sentient. Cars have no sense of self or safety or concern for humans, and cars can do crazy things and collide and get smashed and fly off cliffs, drive off the road, and thereby they're very dangerous and shouldn't be used. Of course, today nobody's saying that anymore. We all drive cars and we don't look at them as evil or as soulless or extremely dangerous. I mean, there's still accidents and occasionally people get hurt. But back then it took a lot of social change and convincing to get people to get into cars and get them to go 60 or 100 miles an hour. That was very, very threatening to humans. Of course, now people are still afraid of other things. They're afraid of AI. They're afraid of self-driving cars. They're saying self-driving cars are dangerous, but actually self-driving cars can save about 1 million lives a year worldwide, every single year. That's more than kind of a world war, even in level of casualties. So, and there's a lot of resistance today to other things. A lot of people don't trust or don't want to see machine learning take over, but it's already beginning to do that. It's already well underway of taking over a lot of different sub-areas of human endeavor and societal tasks and goals. So it's pretty impressive what's going on. A few years later, this took a while because Jeopardy is a harder game than chess, but a computer finally beat humans in Jeopardy, which involves natural language and speech and interpreting sentences in English and giving answers in written form and even voicing them out loud. So IBM's Watson became the world Jeopardy champion just under a decade ago, and look at the scores. It wasn't even a close call. These two guys, Brad and Ken, were world champions at the time, and they lost by a huge margin to IBM's Deep Blue. And IBM's Deep Blue became a benchmark and kind of a test bed for machine learning and AI, and now that platform is deployed to do a lot more than just play Jeopardy. IBM Deep Blue and Watson became technologies that IBM uses to solve lots and lots of other problems based on machine learning. And it's not stopping, it's just accelerating this kind of trend. Just a few years ago, in 2016, Google's Go engine, AlphaGo engine, beat the world champion in the game of Go. Go is much harder than chess, the ancient Chinese game of strategy called Go, when you have a 19 by 19 board. And that took a while because the game tree for Go is a lot deeper and more complex than chess. There's a lot more possible moves. Chess might have 10 to the 80 moves or so, 10 to the 70 moves. Go has maybe 10 to the 200 roughly moves, a lot more deep than chess in terms of game tree depth and breadth and different positions and strategies. But this happened too. So now the world champion Go players are bots, not humans anymore. And as I was going through my career, people said that this problem of playing Go will remain unsolved for at least half a century, maybe a century, maybe never be solved by machines. That's what we thought, because it's so much more complicated game than chess. And chess took many decades to solve, in terms of beating humans, the best human players. So we thought Go will take either centuries or maybe unbounded time and never be mastered by machines against the world champion Go players. Well, this just happened within a few years after that. And now computers are doing more and more, even more sophisticated things. So, and by the way, when the world champion was beaten by AlphaGo, by the Google, and this is actually one of the games right there, in case you're how many people play Go, actually? If you do, you may want to look more deeply into this. There was $1 million prize, so the human had a high incentive to win this thing, not just for the $1 million, but for his reputation, not only for his reputation, but the reputation of the entire human race against machines playing Go. So there's a lot on the line, right? So and he tried really hard, but at some point it wasn't even close. I think he only won one game out of a bunch, not even close to a tie. And that was a few years ago, and now these machines are getting better and better. And again, these are some pictures from the tournament, and that was very dramatic, a lot like the Kasparov event of '97. This just happened 3 years ago. So reality is definitely catching up with science fiction very quickly, in some cases exceeding science fiction expectations. Of course, we saw already self-driving cars, and you saw them in movies before, right? So in Minority Report, there's 20 years ago, there were kind of cool-looking self-driving cars. Will Smith in iRobot had a self-driving car. And today we got the ARPA challenge in 2005 that quickly, within a decade, became the Tesla Model S that you could actually buy and drive, and it drives itself on the road. Pretty amazing. So it's catching up. Reality is catching up to science fiction, and it keeps going. And it's in many cases exceeding, in many cases far exceeding science fiction expectations. So around the house, you have already bots. We mentioned the Roomba that can vacuum for you. And there's even robots that can go into your roof gutters and clean the leaves out of your gutters. You can have robots that go around in pools and keep the pool clean, pool sweeper robots. Of course, in the 60s, you had them in science fiction movies like Rosie the Robot from the Jetsons. Now you have household robots that actually do stuff for you. Some of them can actually cook for you. If your kitchen is big enough to house this robot over your stove, robots can make you meals now from scratch. And of course, in the military arena, you had movies that show militarized robots like Terminators. The early Terminators looked like little roving tanks. You had tracks and machine guns. In reality, now you have robots that not only act like Terminators, they actually look like the old T-105s from the Terminator movies. We still don't have, the Arnold Schwarzenegger kind of, bots, but that's probably not far behind now. In the movie Terminator Salvation, there was actually a motorcycle form factor kind of Terminator that had a Gatling gun, minigun rotary cannon on the side, and it was going around. And now you also have motorcycles that are actual bots that can drive around and navigate terrain and do things. That's actually one of the entries from the ARPA Grand Challenge in 2005. One of them was a motorcycle, not a four-wheeled vehicle. Motorcycle is harder because you have to keep your balance as well as navigate and do other things and be clever. So it's extra kind of level of challenge. So, movie bots often now become reality very quickly. So I'm juxtapositioning reality versus fantasy or versus science fiction. And as time goes, the two are less and less distinguishable, and they kind of blend together. And in fact, science fiction movies serve as the motivation and inspiration for reality, for actual products and prototypes and technologies. So it's a good thing to kind of keep an eye on science fiction, because it's a kind of a litmus test or an indicator of where reality and technology are actually going. And it's been a consistent kind of picture over time that the two are merging. In Terminator also, you had this hunter-killer kind of flying drones that hunt and kill humans. And now we have that in reality. They can be helicopter types, or they can be actual jet planes, or even supersonic or hypersonic planes. So in the movie Stealth 2005, you had a bot that would fly around that looked like a fighter jet, autonomous AI-ish kind of bot, can even land on carriers. Now we got that. We got supersonic bots that can go supersonically and dispense missiles and smart bombs and autonomously track, find, and eliminate targets. And some of them can even land on carriers now. This is not even new. This is the unmanned combat plane, the X-45 by Grumman, and it can do carrier landings and also fly supersonically. And interesting thing about drones, militarized drones, when you have a plane with a human in it, the plane is actually very limited. For example, you can only make at most 7 or 8, 9 G turns, and that's it. terms of aircraft maneuvering and dogfights, aerial dogfights against other planes. Because the humans will pass out at 7 or 8 Gs, and the human will die at 15 Gs. There's too much stress on the human, biological frame. Well, so the plane can't do any better than what the human can tolerate, even with G-suits and other Herculean efforts to preserve the life of the human on board. So the bottleneck in performance in terms of military platform is actually the human in the loop. Plus, the human takes a lot of space. Human needs air support, life support equipment like oxygen and all sorts of ejection seats in case of trouble, and it's excess weight, excess payload capability that you pay or throw away. A drone doesn't have any of those restrictions. So you can have drones like the Reapers and these kind of drones that can pull 30 or 40 G turns, that would kill any human if it was on board. They can fly much further, much faster, much higher. They don't need oxygen, they don't need life support, they don't need ejection seats, and all that can be extra fuel for longer range. And so drones today are far exceeding human fighter planes. The movie Top Gun, Part 2 is about to come out. Tom Cruise, an old sequel from the 80s movie is kind of making a new one. But, the notion of humans going around flying planes and going into combat and saying, I feel the need for speed, like Tom Cruise does in Top Gun. No, that's kind of a, historical artifact now of the past. That's no longer true. So most new planes now in military circles are drones, and it's getting more and more lopsided every year. Fighter pilots hate that because they don't sign up, to become fighter pilots to use a joystick in some warehouse to fly planes halfway around the world. They want to feel the G-forces, and they're kind of macho and kind of cowboyish type characters like Tom Cruise in Top Gun. Pretty typical kind of fighter pilot, kind of cocky and ready to go, but they can't keep up with the drones, so they're ineffective. And it's reality, again, is not just catching up with science fiction, it's exceeding the expectations, and humans are more and more left out of the loop in many scenarios, not just this one. Sigourney Weaver in Terminator, or rather Aliens movie, 1986. How many have seen that movie? She gets into an exoskeleton. It's called a power loader, and gives her a lot of strength, and she can lift tons, and then she fights with the alien monster queen and eventually defeats the alien, but it takes a lot of doing. So these kind of exoskeletons were science fiction back in the 80s. Now you can buy them. This is a military version of the exoskeleton. This is a prototype, but you can carry 150 pounds and walk 4 miles an hour and do that for hours and not get tired, because it's the exoskeleton that's doing all the heavy lifting, literally the heavy lifting. And moreover, in the comic books and the sci-fi world, you had Iron Man, Tony Stark building this Iron Man suit that can do all these interesting, impressive things. Now you got that too. This is a product. It's called the HAL 5 by a company called Cyberdyne. And if Cyberdyne sounds like one of those companies from Terminator, you're right. That's why they named it Cyberdyne. Skynet, if you're a fan. Bottom line is, for about $60K, you can buy an exoskeleton that will give you 5x your actual strength, 5 times amplification of your strength with servo motors in all the joints. It'll run about 5 hours on a charge. Or if you can't afford $60K to buy it, they'll rent it to you for $600 a month. That's actually quite affordable. And this is not science fiction. This is a product. You can get that, not just right now. This was available already more than a decade ago. Now they even have more sophisticated versions of these. So if you work in warehouses and need to lift things or need to do a moving job or furniture or whatever, soon we'll see people in exoskeletons, doing those tasks, not just humans only, and they'll be more and more prevalent. So not quite Iron Man, but getting there in leaps and bounds over time. So there's reality catching up with the science fiction analogs. Pretty impressive. And robotic surgeons in the movie Logan's Run in the 1970s as Michael York, Farrah Fawcett, if you're a fan, you know what I'm talking about. And these robots did surgery on humans. And now, of course, we have the Da Vinci system that we saw earlier and mentioned. That's a product, not science fiction. It costs about $1.5 million, and already was available for a decade now. And many hospitals have this system to do surgery on humans, much better than surgeons. Captain Kirk, if you if you're a fan, he once stole the cloaking device from the Romulans to make the Enterprise disappear. How many even know what I'm talking about? Okay, good. Science fiction, Star Trek buff fans. Well, cloaking devices, again, were science fiction. Harry Potter had a cloaking device. That was more like an invisibility cloak that Harry Potter used in the early films. But now we have those too. We have, this is actually prototypes, cloaking devices. You put something in the middle and it bends the light around it and makes it pass around the object. So from the perspective of somebody standing behind, that object is invisible. If I can see the light coming from behind you as if you weren't there, that's the definition of invisibility. How many get that? Yeah, so we have technologies that do that too now. Cloaking devices, just like Star Trek, just like Harry Potter. Now, they're kind of primitive, and usually some of them are two-dimensional. They don't have full 3D omnidirectional capability. Some of them work in specialized wavelengths, like only in microwaves, wavelength and that kind of thing, not in all spectrum wavelengths like these other ones in science fiction. But they're catching up, and the fact that we can even do that in any wavelength, is already amazing. This kind of invisibility capability. This is an example of another invisibility cloak based on camouflage. Again, this is almost 20 years old now, and it's advanced quite a bit since then. So another example of reality catching up really quickly with science fiction getting more and more sophisticated. The trend is just very, very, very strong and undeniable. It's already happening. There's a famous cartoon of a human being trying to clutch onto some last few things that humans can do that machines still can't do, and so he's writing things only humans can pick stocks, or only humans can improvise jazz, or only humans can play ping pong. And all these things are no longer true, so he keeps crossing them off because now computers and bots can do these things much better than humans. And there's a few things left on the wall. Only a human can review a movie. Only people can have common sense, right? Only a human can translate speech. That's no longer true also. This cartoon is about 10 or 15 years old, and already we see this cartoon is obsolete, because there are things that humans can used to be able to do and machines couldn't, that now machines can do, and that fell out of the domain of human-only kind of expertise. And this guy in the cartoon is getting more and more desperate. He's representing the human race, trying to clutch onto relevance and specialness and uniqueness and capability that machines can't hope to simulate. But it's a losing battle. So machines already exceeded humans in many endeavors and tasks. And so look on the wall here, it says only humans can drive cars. So this cartoon obviously is pre-2005, maybe early 2000s. And now that's no longer true. So we keep crossing off more and more things on the wall in this cartoon. So it's kind of an interesting cartoon that's getting more and more obsolete by the year, not even by the decade. And so, it raises interesting questions, among which is, where is this going? Where is this technology kind of trends going? And the short answer is we don't know exactly. And that's what a lot of people are worried about. It's not a clear trajectory. I mean, it's going to be kind of a paradise scenario where none of us have to work anymore, and computers will build our houses and fetch our foods after growing it and cooking it, and we can just kind of have a nice life, all of us. I mean, all humans. Or will it be a more dark scenario, like Terminator kind of scenario, where computers will decide that we're just not only unnecessary but kind of a blight on the planet and try to get rid of us, because that's what we do to other species and other to other humans too. I mean, we can only hope that the robots won't be as nasty as we are, reality could end somewhere in the middle. Somewhere in the middle where it's sometimes abused and sometimes used wonderfully, and that's probably more likely than either extreme scenario, but we don't know. There's something called the technological singularity, talking about long-term kind of extreme trends. So the technological singularity was popularized by a futurist called Ray Kurzweil. He's a technologist, an inventor, a futurist, a philosopher even. And basically, it says that technology will get better and better and faster, and computers will get more and more capable and far outstrip human capability, that there will be very dramatic consequences of that trend. And machine intelligence and robotics can exceed humans by more and more uh, leaps and bounds and capabilities. And at some point, there'll be a feedback loop, because machines, among all the other things that they'll do, will build other machines that are even better than themselves, like humans do. We build machines that are better than the previous machines, and soon machines will take over that cycle. And they'll build better and better machines, and they'll build machines that are faster, and they'll do it more quickly. And this evolutionary cycle of machines getting better and more capable and bots getting more amazing will accelerate beyond even human perception, much less human capability. In other words, at some point it'll happen so quickly. A technological generation will not just take 2 years or 1 year. A technological generation can take 1 month or 1 week or 2 hours if machines start taking over that feedback loop. At some point, humans will just be spectators. We'll just watch this happening so quickly that we won't even understand what's going on, much less be able to control it or affect it anymore. And that's kind of scary to a lot of people, and for good reason. It can run away from you very easily. So humans may be left behind. Again, this is speculation. This is kind of Ray Kurzweil's vision of the so-called law of accelerating returns, as opposed to the law of diminishing returns. You have this fast forward feedback loop, and technology can literally run away from you, getting better and better by the hour, not even by the year. And that kind of raises all sorts of ominous concerns. One of them is the gray goo, the so-called gray goo concern, that if machines or bots will start using stuff around them as raw material to build better and faster bots or machines, soon enough the entire planet could become one big giant kind of hive of technology, machinery, like the Borg. Star Trek, the Borg. How many remember the Borg from Star Trek? That's kind of this kind of scenario, actually. They take over everything. Resistance is futile. Right? But Ray Kurzweil points out that Moore's law, where computers are getting faster by a factor of 2 every 18 months in terms of chips and capability and computation power, Moore's law is not just about chips. There are Moore's law, there's exponential growth laws in many other domains. And he gives a lot of data to illustrate that assertion. It's not an assertion, it's a fact, actually. So processor performance grows exponentially. These are exponential scales, by the way. So on the bottom you have the year, and the vertical scale is an exponential, it's a log scale, showing the improvement in microprocessor speed and number of transistors per chip. Average transistor price dropped from a few bucks per transistor in the 70s to a few picodollars, of transistors, of transistors per dollar in today. And microprocessor cost per transistor cycle is dropping exponentially, and there's many other exponentials that he points out to. So the notion of Moore's law is something unique and special, and kind of one kind of thing that doesn't occur anywhere else. Is kind of a misnomer. There's Moore's laws all over the place. RAM price, the amount of memory you can buy per dollar, goes up exponentially over time. Disk storage is going up exponentially. And notice these graphs are not even new graphs. Some of them are showing exponential growth, even way before today, like back in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. Internet data traffic is growing exponentially. Supercomputer power is growing exponentially. You have now computers that can do petaflops and even exaflops. Remember your powers of 10. Milestones getting faster and faster. So in terms of biological progress, or just progress in general, it took billions of years for our planet to be created from the Big Bang or whatever, large gas clouds that gelled into planets and solar systems. Billions of years, and then life started about 1 billion years ago, and you had the first organisms, microcellular organisms, single-cell organisms, and then that took 1 billion years for the first cellular organisms to evolve. But then multicellular organisms only took a few 100 million years, and to get from amoebas and tardigrades to chimps and higher-level organisms, mammals, only took a few million years. And humans haven't been around for that long. 100,000 years ago, we were all very hairy and walked around with our knuckles brushing on the ground, living in caves. We didn't have written language even. And 100,000 years later, here we are with smartphones in our pockets, shooting ourselves into space. So the point is, technological evolution and biological evolution, are increasing exponentially in terms of progress, right? I mean, the entire web was just invented in the 1990s, just 2 decades ago. Social media has just existed for 15 years, since early 2000. How many remember the days before Facebook or any social media? I mean, you guys remember it. I definitely remember it. There were no smartphones. There was no web. You couldn't go online and check your balance in your checking account or order a pizza through your smartphone in just a few seconds. You couldn't do any of that stuff. And this is within the last 10 or 15 years. Imagine what will happen in the next 20 years or 40 years or 50 years. It's accelerating. So again, Ray Kurzweil makes this point that everything is accelerating exponentially on many fronts, not just Moore's law. And we just discovered electricity just about 150 years ago, and now everything is electric and getting more so. And that's amazing rapid progress. So some people view humans or biological systems in general as just a bootstrapping mechanism for technology, right? Humans could be thought of as a bootloader for AI. Some people take offense at that analogy. I don't. I think it's pretty cool. If we are a stepping stone in the way to a much more sophisticated life forms and intelligences and AI systems and self-aware robots and AI, I'll be honored to serve in that role. Just like a monkey, a chimpanzee shouldn't be insulted that we evolved from them. If anything is a compliment. Chimpanzee says, wow, look at that. Yeah, I did that. It may not be great for the monkeys once we start eradicating their forests and killing them off and putting them in zoos in large numbers, but that's a separate matter. They can still brag about it even if they're not happy about the consequences. And the consequences don't have to be bad. It's us humans that kind of make everything in our image and get aggressive and hostile and turn a lot of technology into nefarious purposes, like wars and conflicts and dominating other humans and that kind of thing. It doesn't have to be this way. It's not inherent in the technology. It's just what we tend to do. But that's a different discussion and set of arguments. A number of patents granted also growing exponentially. The growth in gene banks, sequences, genomes sequenced, and our understanding of genomics. Back in the 1990s, throughout the 90s, there was a so-called Human Genome Project where they tried to sequence a single human genome. And that took 10 years and $1 billion to sequence one human genome. That's how long it took and how expensive it was. Today, you can sequence an entire genome of arbitrary organism in just hours for only about $100. And soon, you could do it for only a few dollars. And biometric locks can become genome sequencing machines, even in things as mundane as locks to open doors, or sign into your checking account. You can have a DNA test that happens in seconds, and we're very close to that, and just costs fractions of a penny per use. So Ray Kurzweil kind of says there's about 6 different epochs in the universe's evolution. The first one took a long time, where physics and chemistry dominated and ruled. And that took a few billion years, and biology kind of took over, and that took a few 100 million years for life forms to evolve as we know them. And so these epochs take shorter and shorter. So the first was basically physics, and then biology, and then brains were evolved to the point that they can start dominating the process itself of evolution. And now we're using our brains to direct technology and direct our own evolution. And we have genome sequencing technology like CRISPR, Cas9. We can actually modify dramatically our own genome using our minds, our brains, and our technology that is brains invented. And finally, we created enough technology, and this just happened in the last few centuries, a very tiny fraction of the first 3 epochs. And each epoch is succeedingly quicker and happens much, much faster, because there's all these fast forward feedback loops that are interacting with each other. So once technology is taken over, like it's doing right now, humans will become augmented with their own technology. Humans and their technology will merge. And how do we know that? Because it's already happening. A lot of people are enhanced in various cybernetic ways. There are people with pacemakers in their bodies. A pacemaker is not a trivial thing. It runs a full operating system, multi-threaded, has about 30 or 40,000 lines of code, and it does a lot more than just keep track of your heart. Some people have chips in their brain that allow them to see, right? With cameras in their glasses, allow them to bypass their visual retina and visual cortex and inject the images right into the brain with electrical signals, so blind people can begin to see now. They won't have 20/20 vision, but they won't be blind either, and they can become more functional. How many of you heard of these technologies? A lot of people are now walking around in various augmented ways. You're already for years you can have knee surgery that replaces your knees with titanium parts, or your spine, or your other bones, but many of the systems are active and can interact with the brain. You can have systems now that have a chip in your brain that if you want to walk, you could be a paraplegic, so you can't move your legs and you're disabled, you're paraplegic, sitting in a wheelchair, but the chip in your brain can bypass your damaged spine, and it can deliver the signals from the brain directly to your legs and to your muscles, and you can walk while you have a severed spine. Ordinarily you couldn't walk. So that already exists. It's not science fiction, it's fact. It's getting more and more sophisticated and cheaper. And soon humans will be augmented in all sorts of other interesting ways, and humans are to a large degree cybernetic in various ways. Imagine if you can surf the web in your head. Instead of Google Glass already got us halfway there. Google Glass, you have the browser and the camera and everything in your glasses, and you can sort of look to the right and see web pages and kind of interact. How many have heard of Google Glass, Google Glasses? So that's again a product. It's not science fiction. And so imagine if you're going to an interview with Google Glasses, and you can kind of look up stuff on Wikipedia while you're being asked questions. You'll be a lot more impressive candidate in the interview if you could do that. In fact, in phone interviews, you can actually already do that by typing away quietly while you're being questioned over Skype. But imagine if instead of being in your glasses, it's actually directly into your brain. There's no reason it has to remain in the glasses. It already went from the desktop to the glasses. It can go from the glasses to your brain, have the chip and your internet connection in your head implanted, so that you can actually surf the web while you're talking to people, looking them up. And you don't even have to do all that yourself. The system can actually notice somebody, look them up on the web, and tell you exactly who there is and what their vita is, their resume and their bio, and you know a whole lot about them before you even shake their hand 5 seconds later. All that's coming also. Anyway, so technology is already merging with humans. The idea is that it will merge more and more, and it'll go advance and evolve even faster. And at some point, it'll happen exponentially and so fast that you'll kind of run away from us. That's called the technological singularity. So right now we are here, right between the technological epoch and the merger of technology with humans to a very high degree. It's already started. And soon enough, we might be in this last epoch where the universe just wakes up, basically. Technology takes over, starts using raw materials. Entire planets could become alive as giant AIs and send probes to other planets, other solar systems, other parts of the universe, and the universe itself will become woke. That's the theory. That's the idea there of the technological singularity. It may seem far-fetched. Some people think it's already well underway and happening. People can debate about how fast it'll happen. Ray Kurzweil says it'll happen in a few decades. Not more than a few decades. I think it's a little bit optimistic, or it may not happen at all, or we may try to put an end to it somehow, or it may start running away from us and we can't even stop it. We don't know, actually. We have no idea. But we're in a very interesting era of the evolution of the universe, where biological systems have created technology that now evolves 1,000,000 times faster than evolution, and in fact can affect the evolution itself using gene splicing and editing genomes and so on, for better or worse, right? Some Chinese scientists just a few months ago announced that the modified humans, and they actually got born and they're alive. It's the first modified humans, and he said that he did that to prevent them from having a gene that make them susceptible to AIDS. And it sounds like a good thing, but it's actually could be a very dangerous thing. Because now, when they have children, they have this modification, and it's very hard to tell whether a modification is good or bad or indifferent, and what the long-term consequences are. Humans are very bad at predicting long-term consequences, and global warming is one example of that. We just burn fossil fuels and drive cars that run on dead dinosaurs as fuel. Not on the face of it a good idea to begin with, but then, if the polar caps melt, despite what our president says, our planet can have a very, very hard and sad future potentially. So it's hard to tell where things go and what the consequences are. But that's what the technological singularity is, this theory. And it doesn't have to be as dramatic as Kurzweil says, but it could be some milder version of it. But it's definitely a trend. It's undeniable. Think about how technology advanced in just the last 10 or 20 years, since most of you were in grade school. It's very dramatic, the change and the pace of the change. So there's also a lot of warnings about that. You already mentioned a few. The gray goo phenomena, the day the Earth stood still with Keanu Reeves, which is a remake of the old 1930s movies, the day the Earth stood still. And nanobots would take over and use stuff around us as raw materials. And when you start having nanobots use stuff around them as raw materials, humans are just raw material. And everything humans built is also raw material, and the whole planet can become one ball of gray goo. So this is kind of the gray goo kind of fear or concern that these technologists and futurists have, and it's not unfounded. I mean, this could be a real danger. And when you have books that are called Nanotechnology for Dummies, the field is advanced to a point where you have popular books that teach children about nanotechnology. That it's not only here, it's significant, these kind of technologies. And of course, we already saw the Terminator kind of scenarios and talked about that. It doesn't have to be gray goo; it could just be machines running amok, and it's a valid concern. It's the old Frankenstein story, basically taken to the next technological level. You create technology that you can't control anymore, and it has a life of its own, and it becomes sentient. It acquires free will, and then all bets are off as to what would suit its purposes. And if it agrees with you, everything will be fine. But if you disagree, you and the technology disagree with each other, humanity can have a very bad day, or a very bad decade, or future. So there's a lot of writing about that. Famous article by Bill Joy called "Why the Future Doesn't Need Us," and he kind of raises this kind of alarm bells about gray goo and runaway technology and negative consequences that we can't control and we won't like when it happens. And Bill Joy, by the way, is no slouch. He co-founded Sun Microsystems. He co-invented Java and did a lot of other pretty interesting. So he's got a lot of street cred comes with him. So when he talks about stuff like that, we should listen. It's not just alarmist. It's he has some interesting points. And of course, there's counter arguments against that we shouldn't be so worried, and it'll all be good, and we won't have Terminators, and technology won't do anything bad to us. The truth is probably somewhere between those two extremes. It won't be all good. It's already not all good. There's things like Chernobyl and global warming and all sorts of other kind of global scale kind of disasters and consequences, and so it's definitely things to be worried about. But it shouldn't just be all paranoia and refusal to move forward and embrace technology in good ways, because it's helping us a lot. The reason that humans can live till 80 or 90 or 100 these days is because of technology. If not for modern technology and modern medicine and science and biology and chemistry and all the things that are saving our lives and allowing us to, because the average age used to be 30 back a few centuries ago. If you got to be 40, you were really, really lucky and unusual. Never mind, people suffered in really terrible ways just a couple of centuries ago, and now we can mitigate a lot of that. But it also has negative consequences as well. Sometimes it's abused, and sometimes it's not used well, if not abused. So anyway, that's one of the articles that give pro and against kind of technological arguments, a lot of philosophy. There's a technological singularity summit. Every year they get together and talk about all these things and where technology is going. And these, again, are very interesting people. These are not paranoids or people who are anti-technology. A lot of these people you already know. Some of these people that run the technological singularity summits that are happening every year. There's even a technological singularity university. And some of them, Peter Thiel, who co-founded PayPal and Facebook, actually. Stephen Wolfram of Mathematica. I actually met him once in the 80s, right after he got his MacArthur Genius Prize, that he used to create a piece of software that does symbolic math that later became Mathematica. Interesting guy. So they get together and ponder all the consequences and trends and try to project where things are going and how fast we'll get there. And it's a pretty interesting, grandiose kind of discussions and ideas and philosophical considerations. So a lot more to read about all that stuff. For extra credit, follow some of the links and tell me what you think and what you found. Any questions about any of this or thoughts? This kind of stuff will affect all of us. Actually, has already affected all of us. Facebook, just social media, has all sorts of interesting unintended consequences. Facebook, it sounds good. You have pictures. Everybody can see your family, your vacation, what you had for lunch yesterday. It sounds pretty benign, but it's causing a lot of depression in many people. People look at Facebook and see there's a lot of pretensions going on. People pretend they have cool lives when they really don't, and try to impress everybody. Meanwhile, they're watching everybody else who's doing the same thing, and they're getting depressed that everybody's cooler than they are and have better vacations and been to nicer places and have cooler friends, and it's contributed to mental illness and depression and schizophrenia and other things. My brother is a psychologist, and he treats people, among other the usual stuff like depression and bipolar disorders. He treats people with Facebook addiction, and more generally, video game addiction. And video games, it's no longer video games like Atari, Asteroids or that kind of thing. Video games have advanced to the point where you have, Second Life. Games like Second Life, where it simulates a whole world. World of Warcraft type games where you have a simulated world. So it's almost like Neo in the Matrix now. Keanu Reeves as Neo in the Matrix, kind of living in an altered reality that, and some of these patients come to my brother, the psychologist, and says, I'm in this virtual world 16 hours a day. I've lost my job. My wife left me. My kids won't talk to me, and I can't stop, and they're addicted. It's a real addiction, like drugs or alcohol or gambling addiction. Because in this, and my brother says, so why don't you just stop cold turkey? Just stop it. Just disable your account and start having a life. He says, I can't. And my brother says, why not? He says, well, I'm the mayor in Second Life of this virtual town, and my citizens depend on me to come in every day and run their town, and all these avatars running around, and I'm in charge, and I can't just stop. What would happen if I stop? It'd be a disaster. I mean, and my brother says, okay, and we have a lot of work to do here with this patient, and a lot of people are in this category. They live online, whether it's in Facebook or Second Life or World of Warcraft or some other virtual world, and video games are, again, I say games, they're not games, they're reality simulations. And some people have a much better life in this simulation than they do in the real world. Some people actually make a living in these virtual worlds. They make clothes for avatars. So if you don't like the way the avatar is dressed, you can buy designer clothes for your avatar, and your avatar will look a lot cooler with this, and you pay in real dollars on eBay for virtual clothes or even virtual weapons, magic potions and magic swords that you buy in these worlds, virtual item, but you pay in real dollars on eBay or on PayPal. And some people make a living creating these virtual items. How many know that? They make a very good living. Some make 6 figures or even 7 figures, just creating virtual items in these virtual worlds. So it's no longer a game. It's your job. It's your life at that point. And some people can make a lot more money as virtual games than any real job in the real world. So it's blending together, the virtual world and the real world, and it's causing a lot of issues, and psychologists haven't even began to wrap their minds about all the consequences of that, and some of it is not positive consequences. companies already are recruiting in these virtual worlds. Even the CIA has virtual world recruiting in World of Warcraft and Second Life and all these other games. They track the avatars and see who has the real skills to do whatever it is these agencies need to do, and then they contact these avatars and hope that the person behind them will join the organization, and they're already doing that actively. It was interesting to read about somebody in the virtual world created a video game like Simon, like a handheld video game for avatars in the virtual world. So you're already in a virtual world, which is basically a game or a simulated reality. And inside, you have a handheld game that you can play while you're in this virtual game. So now your reality is like 2 times removed from the real one, not just once. You're in a virtual game, and inside, you're playing another smaller virtual game, and that's pretty convoluted. Any questions or comments about any of that? It's pretty interesting trends. Yeah. So where it's actually going to go, we don't know, but we'll see. We're right here, and things are moving very fast. Yeah. 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 A lot of these games become spectator sports. You can actually, they actually have tournaments of these games. Some people make their living, beating other people in these virtual worlds and tournaments. And these tournaments actually, or these games are so sophisticated, they completely mimic real life. There's actually crime rings. There's organized crime inside these games. Interestingly, so people getting together with nefarious intent, and they rob other avatars of their valuables. Right, whether it's gold coin or artifacts that they bought on eBay, and they steal it and they beat them up, and sometimes they kill their avatar. Sometimes they rape their avatar. Some of these games have sexual overtones and very explicit ones. And some people are suing because their avatar got raped or killed or beaten or murdered, and they sue in real courts in the real world, saying they were really traumatized and they want millions of dollars of damages, from the company that runs these platforms, because they were seriously traumatized, and something terrible was done to their avatar. And the courts are grappling to even determine the legality of some of these situations. If you go into a virtual world and rob some avatar and deprive them of property, steal their magic potion or their gold coins that they have in the game, but that they paid real money on eBay or PayPal to acquire, did you commit a felony or not? I mean, the courts aren't completely in agreement about the consequences, because you rob them of real value. They spend $1,000 acquiring these things which you just stole from them illegally inside the game, inside the virtual world, and they essentially committed grand theft. And they deprived you of real value. You actually paid US dollars for it, not just Linden dollars or avatar dollars or whatever they call them. So the legal system hasn't even caught up to these kind of scenarios. Has a crime been committed? Even that question is nowadays very fuzzy, vague, and debatable and arguable, and there's court cases that are very difficult to resolve. And so these virtual worlds mimic human behavior. You can become a developer and build buildings and sell it in the virtual world for real dollars or even virtual dollars, and make money and do things, and you could be robbed and threatened and extorted and even killed, and your avatar can, and often there's consequences spilled to the real world, and they have very serious real world consequences. It's not just all fun and games. It can get very serious very fast. Any other thoughts or comments? All right, well, stuff to think about. Next time we'll start talking about NP-completeness, fascinating theory that involves analyzing the difficulty of problems, intrinsic difficulty of problems, and grouping them together and coming up with fast heuristics for intractable problems. All right, see you then.
Is the mic on? Like the
Oh, I think so.
I wondered.
Oh. No, there was no attendance.